Some murder cases remain unsolved because investigators never find enough evidence. This wasn't one of them. From the very beginning, detectives had something many investigators only hoped for: a DNA profile left behind by the killer. Years later, they had something else: a confession, a conviction, and a community that believed justice had finally been served. The case was considered closed, but hidden inside the evidence was a contradiction no one could explain. The DNA refused to agree with the story investigators believed. It would take more than 20 years, advances in forensic science, and the determination of a mother who refused to stop asking questions before the truth finally emerged. The same DNA that seemed to solve the case would eventually prove that investigators had convicted the wrong man. How could the most reliable piece of evidence be ignored for decades? And how did it finally lead detectives to the person who had been hiding in plain sight all along? This is the story of Angie Dodge and the DNA that never stopped telling the truth. In the summer of 1996, 20-year-old Angie Dodge was living in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Friends and family remembered her as independent, kind, and full of plans for the future. Like many young adults, she was beginning to build a life of her own. Nothing about that summer suggested her name would become known across the United States for one of the most significant DNA investigations in modern criminal justice. But on the morning of June 13th, 1996, everything changed. Angie was found dead in her apartment. The crime shocked Idaho Falls. Violent crimes of this nature were rare in the community, and investigators immediately recognized they were dealing with a homicide that demanded every available forensic resource. As detectives began processing the apartment, they carefully documented every trace of evidence left behind. Among that evidence was something invisible to the naked eye: DNA. At the time, forensic DNA testing was still developing into the powerful investigative tool we know today. Investigators believed it could identify the killer. What they didn't know was that this tiny biological trace would remain the most important witness for more than 2 decades. In many homicide investigations, detectives begin with very little. A witness who only caught a glimpse, a blurry security camera, a partial fingerprint, sometimes nothing at all. But the investigation into Angie's murder began with something investigators rarely obtain so early: a usable DNA profile believed to belong to the killer. It was one of the strongest pieces of forensic evidence available in 1996. If the right suspect was ever found, investigators believed the science could answer the most important question of all. Was this the person who committed the crime? Detectives worked around the clock, interviewing friends, neighbors, co-workers, and anyone who might have crossed paths with Angie in the days leading up to her death. Tips poured in from across Idaho Falls. Every lead was examined. Every possible motive was explored. But despite months of investigation, the DNA profile matched no one. At the time, national DNA databases were still limited. If a person's DNA wasn't already in the system, investigators had little chance of identifying them through technology alone. The case began to slow. Pressure mounted. The community wanted answers. Angie's family wanted justice. And investigators were determined to prove they had not overlooked the person responsible. Then, more than a year after the murder, the investigation suddenly changed direction. A young man named Christopher Tapp entered the picture. At first, he wasn't identified because of DNA. He came to investigators' attention through interviews and information gathered during the investigation. Detectives believed he might know more than he was saying. What followed would become one of the most debated chapters in the case. Christopher Tapp was questioned repeatedly by investigators. The interviews stretched over many hours across multiple sessions. As the questioning continued, investigators became increasingly convinced that he had been involved in Angie's murder. Eventually, Christopher Tapp confessed. To many watching the case unfold, that confession appeared to answer every remaining question. A confession is often seen as one of the strongest forms of evidence in a criminal investigation. Combined with investigators' confidence in their case, many believed justice had finally arrived. But there was one problem. The DNA collected from the crime scene did not match Christopher Tapp. This created a difficult contradiction. If the DNA belonged to the killer, why didn't it belong to the man who had confessed? Investigators proposed that another unidentified person may have participated in the crime while Tapp played a different role. The prosecution argued that the confession, together with other evidence they presented, supported a conviction despite the DNA discrepancy. The defense disagreed. They argued that the forensic evidence raised serious doubts. Ultimately, a jury convicted Christopher Tapp. For many people, the case was over. A conviction had been secured. The headlines moved on, but the DNA remained unchanged, locked inside an evidence file, waiting. For most people, a conviction would have brought a sense of finality. But for Angie's mother, Carol Dodge, something never felt complete. She wanted justice for her daughter. And over time, she became increasingly convinced that justice could only exist if the right person had been held accountable. Carol began asking difficult questions. If the DNA recovered from the crime scene didn't match Christopher Tapp, could investigators have made a mistake? These weren't easy questions. They challenged the conclusion of a years-long homicide investigation. They challenged a conviction that many believed had already delivered justice. But Carol wasn't interested in protecting a verdict. She was interested in protecting the truth. As years passed, attorneys, journalists, and independent experts also began examining the case more closely. Some pointed to the interrogation techniques used during Christopher Tapp's questioning. Others focused on the forensic evidence that had remained consistent since 1996. The DNA profile hadn't changed. Science hadn't changed it. Time hadn't changed it. Only investigators' understanding of what it could reveal was beginning to evolve. Meanwhile, forensic technology was advancing at an extraordinary pace. DNA analysis became more precise. Databases grew larger. Scientists developed new ways to compare genetic evidence. And then a revolutionary technique emerged, one that had the potential to solve cases once thought impossible. It was called investigative genetic genealogy. Instead of searching for the suspect directly, investigators could search for the suspect's relatives. For the first time in decades, the evidence had a new chance to speak. Unlike traditional DNA databases, investigative genetic genealogy doesn't look for an exact match. Instead, it searches for people who share portions of DNA with the unknown individual. Even distant relatives can provide investigators with valuable clues. Those clues become family trees. Those family trees become investigative leads. And eventually, those leads can point toward a single individual. Using preserved evidence from Angie's case, Investigators began this painstaking process. Thousands of names were considered. Family histories were traced. Generations were mapped. Each new branch narrowed the search. What had once seemed impossible slowly became achievable. The investigation began focusing on one family, then one household, and finally, one man. His name was Brian Dripps. What made the discovery even more remarkable was how ordinary it seemed. Brian Dripps had lived in Idaho Falls in 1996. He was not a stranger passing through town. He had lived only a short distance from Angie Dodge's apartment. For years, he had remained just outside the investigation's reach. Now, investigators needed one final answer. Would his DNA match the profile preserved since the day Angie was killed? The evidence had waited more than 2 decades for this moment, and it was about to deliver its answer. More than 20 years after Angie Dodge's murder, investigators obtained a DNA sample from Brian Dripps. For decades, the evidence had remained locked away, unchanged. Now, modern science would answer the question that had haunted Idaho Falls since 1996. The comparison was made. The DNA matched. The same biological evidence collected from Angie's apartment all those years earlier identified Brian Dripps as the source. When confronted with the evidence, Dripps admitted to killing Angie Dodge. According to investigators, he told them he had acted alone. It was a stunning breakthrough. For the first time in over 2 decades, the forensic evidence, the investigation, and the suspect all aligned. The DNA had not solved the case twice. It had been pointing to the same person from the very beginning. What changed was the ability of investigators to understand what the evidence was trying to tell them. For Angie's family, there was finally an answer. But there was still one more chapter that needed to be written. Because if Brian Dripps was the killer, what did that mean for Christopher Tapp? Long before Brian Dripps was identified, serious doubts had already begun to surround Christopher Tapp's conviction. His confession had remained at the center of the case. But the DNA never supported the conclusion that he was the source of the biological evidence recovered from the crime scene. After years of legal challenges and renewed examination of the evidence, Christopher Tapp's conviction was overturned. Later, following the identification of Brian Dripps as the killer, Tapp was fully exonerated. One of the most remarkable voices supporting that outcome was Angie Dodge's own mother. Carol Dodge believed that justice for her daughter required more than a conviction. It required the right conviction. Her willingness to question the original investigation, even when it meant reopening painful memories, helped keep attention focused on the evidence. In doing so, she became a powerful advocate for both her daughter and for the pursuit of truth. This case became a landmark example of 2 important lessons. First, DNA evidence can reveal answers that were once impossible to find. Second, a confession alone is not always enough to establish the full truth. Sometimes, justice requires the courage to admit that a mistake was made. For more than 20 years, the answer was never truly lost. It rested silently inside a DNA profile preserved at crime scene. The evidence never changed. It never forgot. It simply waited for science to catch up. When that day finally came, one family received the answers they had been seeking for decades. An innocent man regained his freedom, and the person responsible for Angie's murder was finally identified. The Angie Dodge case reminds us that the pursuit of justice is not measured by how quickly a case is closed, but by whether the truth has truly been found. Because in the end, the smallest piece of evidence carried the greatest truth. If you found this case compelling, consider subscribing to Silence of the Truth for more evidence-driven true crime documentaries that uncover the stories behind the headlines. What do you think was the biggest turning point in this investigation? The preservation of the DNA, advances in genetic genealogy, or Carol Dodge's determination to keep searching for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below.